involved in electronic sound manipulation for a really long time, from what I can see in my research. Could you give us an idea of what it was that and when you got really started into manipulating sound and creating music using electronic devices?
Yeah, I was in high school in the 60s, and at that time there was a lot of music becoming available that sounded weird, and some of it electronic, and a lot of fun experimental things happening. And so my ears got turned on to it before my fingers got to touch any of it. But it wasn't too much longer after that. I think it was a little bit at the end of high school. I got to play with a couple of little things, but mostly I got accepted to as a employee student at a college in Wisconsin. It was the only place at the time with an undergraduate electronic music program.
Really?
A little place called Mount Scenario College, no longer exists. And so that's kind of where I started, and there I got my hands on a VCS3, the Putney from London, or from Putney, England. And then 2 years later, I was at Cal Arts on the Buchla.
Okay.
And then the Serge, which was happening right there at that time. And so I just happened to be perfectly positioned, both in time and place, for this analog synth thing.
Were there any particular individuals or fellow musicians also that helped to usher along your work that you're currently working in now?
Well, in the old days, at that time, I was influenced by a lot of the older things, like the avant-garde institutional college music. But towards the end of the 60s, I'm trying to remember when it was, 67, 65, something like that, a band came out that was called Silver Apples. And not to be confused with Silver Apples of the Moon by Mort Subotnick, who ended up being my teacher. But Silver Apples, it was a band, and they were the first synth pop band. And they integrated rock and roll and circuits, and they really turned my head around at the same time, because it was like one of the first instances of where that academic thinking moved into the real world. And I was very interested in being in the real world, even though I ended up doing the academic thing too. But the real world was my hope.
So you were you got off into the into the street, so to speak, with working with rock practitioners and experimenting in electronics in that way.
Right. Well, my first band was in high school, and I put out my first record in, I guess I was in the 10th grade, and I played organ at that time. And so I would do things like take my guitar and put it up to the back of my organ, and I would get every tone generator in there coming through the pickups of the guitar, and I would play, tone masses,
Wow.
with the pickups, because everything was so badly done that they picked each other up.
Right.
And of course, all the tone clusters on the organ were all very effective. At that time, I even had keys to a church where I got to play the pipe organ, so I was really into tone clusters, kind of Ligeti sort of thinking. And that's all very electronic too, even though it wasn't done electronically. It certainly goes to the same place, looking to make sounds that have a value other than the melody they represent or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you had a first band in high school, and did you continue working with other groups through those years after?
Well, what happened was I had the first band in high school, The Boat. And then in college, I met up with a guy named Bryce Robley, and he died a while back, unfortunately, but we did a lot of music together. And so we put together a band called Lem, and we put an album out as Lem. And then we put a band together called Mobius, and we put out 2 albums as Mobius. One of them got really famous because it has a synth pop version of Light My Fire on it. And that's a hit to this day, like in the Italo disco world and everything. So it was a series of bands, and then after that I had a more mainstream band, but still a synth pop band called Invisible Zoo, and we had hits in the 80s. And I still play in that medium a little bit. Almost nobody ever hears my rock output now, but I still do make it. Occasionally I play with a rock band to benefit veterans who are recovering. We offer music therapy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And you play a particular instrument nowadays. Could you tell folks what that synthesizer is and maybe a little bit of its history?
Yeah. Well, I play all of this stuff. I play the new digital instruments and everything.
Right.
But I have something most people don't, so I spend most of my time with it, and that's the Mystery Serge. It's a Serge modular synthesizer. And the first, um, the Serge Trepnin, actually operated his business right across the street from where we're sitting right now. Although it didn't start there. I worked with him when I was in Los Angeles. And it was the very first commercial Serge synthesizer. I was the first person to order one from him when he decided to make a company of it. And it had been happening at the stairwell at CalArts where I was a student. So it's a brilliant instrument. It's still going strong. It's been refurbished many times, but more recently, about two and a half years ago, by Kevin Brahaney, the space music pioneer. And it is better now than it's ever been. It is one of the best examples of a truly amazing instrument that transcends time. People think, oh, I'm going to get a new synthesizer. Well, be my guest, because you can't buy many of these.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm going to continue to play my Stradivarius.
Right, exactly. I've noticed that there are some of the younger synthesizer practitioners have actually purchased instruments that look similar to, in terms of its setup, the wire to wire, the connectors. I noticed there's been a resurgence of that, so to speak. And I'm wondering, how do you attribute that increased interest in old synthesizers? Is that because of its tactile value, or,
I really don't know, because it kind of happened when I wasn't looking.
Right, okay. Right.
My guess is that it must have something to do with the difference between, as you say, tactile, but it's not only touching, it's also hearing things that are more organic, so to speak. I mean, it's hard to imagine an analog synthesizer as being an organic thing, but compare it to a laptop, and I think you can see that, it's starting to look kind of human.
That's true, and when you say that, it reminds me, actually, whenever I see an instrument like that, I always get this image of the brain. In my, because of the connectors and how everything connects. A lot of times when people think synthesizer, they think keyboards. But as I'm going to show a little later in the broadcast here of you playing your Mystery Serge, people will see that no, it's wire to wire, it's connectors. And how does I've always wondered about this. When you play your synthesizer, if I close my eyes, there's no disconnect between the sound and how it flows. And I'm wondering if you have a philosophical or a technical explanation for how you're able to seamlessly connect all those sounds using wire-to-wire connecting. I know, but I've had to ask that question because that's the thing that always stands out to me.
Well, let me try to answer it in parts, maybe, because I don't have an overview answer to that. But first of all, when I listen to my own music, when I'm creating my own music, I'm not only interacting with it in a master plan kind of way. Here I made this score and everything will confine itself to it. I'm a participant in a series of events. And that's because I like to play music that way. That's why I don't hook a keyboard up to my synthesizer. It's because I don't want everything to be limited to the finger and a key. Because first of all, the keys don't mean much to me. I mean, I do play tonal music, but it's just not thought of that way. So when I think of music, I think first of all that the sound itself has a value beyond what it's playing. That's my first philosophical position, my first default position. And the second thing is that when I create a piece of music, a part of that is to create the instrument that it's played on, which is different than what I do from what the average musician does. I make patches, but patches aren't music and patches aren't an instrument. A combination of patches put together for a purpose create an instrument that's playable. When I walk into a place like here today, it's nothing, even though there's a patch on it, and that's an instrument. But the box itself, it's just nothing. It's a canvas, really. And that's why it's different than other instruments. How many instruments can be a canvas, really?
Not that many, as I know of. Yeah, exactly. Wow, okay. Well, actually, that does answer my question, at least on my level. I hope folks will understand that. But they'll get to see some of your work today here at Robot Speak.
Mm-hmm.
Put that on the video. So tell me, and I asked Ruth Weiss, who you're going to be performing at the Outstanding Music Summit on July 30th, what your thoughts are on what folks might potentially experience when they come to your show. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting because Ruth and I decided, we got together and we played together in an improvisational context, just her and Hal and I. And it was fun. We enjoyed it, which was the big deal, right? You know, let's go away either enjoying this or let's just go away. But we enjoyed it. And it's going to be a surprise. It's going to be a surprise for all of us. Hal and Ruth know where they're going. And Hal, in fact, you know, is like really strong, you know, about where they're going. But both Hal and Ruth are going to have a nice surprise, and that is that they're not going to be able to predict the evening either, because they've invited another element into it. Right. And we decided very carefully, we talked about it on the phone a number of times, that we wouldn't get together again, we wouldn't work stuff up. Worked well the first time, we were going to let it be, you know, and work on our feelings.
Excellent.
And I think that that's going to be the strength of it, really.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to hear is reaction between people. We're going to hear me reacting to what comes out of Ruth's mouth, and I have not read many of the poems that we're going to be using. Mm-hmm. And she's going to be hearing what's coming out of me, and that's going to create this loop, and it's going to be really fascinating to see what happens.
And I really look forward to it. Yeah. Well, that's great, and I don't know either, and I think that that's the beauty of what a lot of us are working in, is the mystery and the surprise value of what we present at a live concert setting. So
that's the fun of it for me. I mean, you know, I have a lot of friends who put out a lot of releases and a lot of download releases and stuff, and I just find that a kind of not as warm of an experience as just going out and playing in front of people. So I kind of do this more, and instead of. Right. I suppose I should be doing some of the other too, but but this is for me, really. I mean, at this point in my life, I do this for me. So.
Right, exactly. That's great. Well, thanks, Doug. I appreciate you talking with me, and I think I know we all look forward to hearing you and Ruth and Hal perform at the summit on July 30th at the Community Music Center.
It's been really great fun so far with her, and thank you so much for having us on it. And I really appreciate that you put this together. I mean, I would have enjoyed playing by myself or in any other context, but I like that you're thinking about how things out there can be put together, because I want those experiences.
It kind of fell on me too. I met Ruth by surprise, and then I had this weird surprise thought, and then I said, hey, maybe Doug would like to play with Ruth, and maybe Ruth would like to take the, as she puts it, the bend of the road. And it turns out she does, and you all are interested in doing this. So
this is going to be great fun. Thanks so much for putting the summit together.
Absolutely. All right.